Hey everybody, welcome back. We are getting ready to do another reaction. This one is still in the Dahmer series, but it's not part of the Netflix Dahmer. I told y'all that I would look for some information to react to when it comes to Dahmer and what was accurate and what wasn't accurate in the Netflix series. And my friend Kenny actually did a segment on it. It's an hour long. So we're going to watch that. And then right after I talk about his perspective a little bit, then we'll watch. Did I decide Looper or Miss Mojo? Not Miss Mojo. WatchMojo has a what was accurate, what wasn't accurate. They're not always accurate in their information, but we'll see what they have to say as well. So I've talked about my friend Kenny before. We're not like best buds or anything like that. I don't want to give the wrong impression, but we are friends. We went to high school together and saw him most recently at our high school reunion. I guess it was 2022 was our high school reunion. It was the big 3-0. Yeah, it would have been 2022. So I got to see him there. We talked a little bit. We talked about YouTube a bit. But Kenny, or Kenneth, as he goes by on his channel, he is a cold case detective. He, like I said, was in high school with me. Out of high school, he went into the Marines. Then he went into law enforcement, did undercover for a while, and is now retired from law enforcement and does cold cases as his next career. I don't know exactly the timeline on everything and all the nitty gritty detail, but if a lot of the true crime stuff that's on streaming, television, in the news, all that kind of stuff, he gives his perspective on it. And so far, I've agreed with him on just about everything. I was trying to think of anything I didn't agree with him on. But I will say definitively I've agreed with him on just about everything. So I like his perspective. I like his approach to it. And he talks you through how he goes through the victimology and all of that to help him in solving some of these cold cases. And he's also done on the Discovery Channel, The Hunt for the Zodiac Killer. So some of you might have seen him on that if you watched that series. So he's done a few things here and there. If you like not cold cases, if you like true crime, I recommend his channel. I'll have his info linked down below. I'll even tag him. I told him I'd tag him the next time I reacted to one of his videos, and I haven't since I saw him when I said that. But we're getting it done now. So go over to his channel. I would almost guarantee you'll enjoy his perspective on things. He doesn't put up with any crap either. So you can badmouth him all you want. He'll just ignore you. But at any rate, I do recommend his channel for getting a law enforcement perspective on these things. Plus, he can get access to some information that we may not necessarily have access to, or he would know procedure that I, a citizen, would not necessarily know. So check it out after I react, or check him out and then come back and react, because I'm not posting his full video, only what I react to of his videos. So if you want to see all the in between stuff, definitely go to his channel and watch the full thing. Okay, enough sponsoring him. I told him he's got way more supporters than I do, as far as subscribers. But, who knows? I may be introducing him to some of you all. So we'll find out. Let's go ahead and see what he says about the Jeffrey Dahmer situation. His is actually entitled Jeffrey Dahmer / insane monster or calculated killer / a real cold case detective's opinion. And he does emphasize that these are his opinions if it's not an actual fact that he's got from the case files that he's gotten a hold of. All right, let's get into it.
And to be honest with you, I think because when this happened, 1991, I was in 11th grade. Uh, I kind of chalked him up of just being crazy.
I wasn't sure if he had seen the Netflix series, so it's good to know that he's seen it. So he'll probably draw some parallels or non-parallels to that. So that will also help confirm or not confirm or whatever what he's getting ready to share.
I just, in my mind, I chalked him up to being crazy. And that didn't intrigue me. Well, what intrigues me is
Meanwhile, I was intrigued by it. I just can't keep
regular
all the
people
information
who
straight.
seem normal. This series I watched and I was intrigued. And I thought it was very, very well done. Some of the scenes were a little too drawn out for me. I mean, he pled insanity, or not. And I think
Okay, so that's interesting. He says that he did end up pleading insanity. I thought I think the show went the direction that he did not plead insanity. Or maybe they just forced the subject and they didn't show us that part of it where his attorney asked the judge for a forensic evaluation to see if he was fit to stand trial or not. Although it seems that he was in regular population of the prison, and so therefore that would tell me that either he didn't have a forensic evaluation for insanity, or he had the evaluation and I forgot what I was saying. It's been a weird day. I did not sleep well. We went and watched the Marvels, my friend and I, so we did see that. But yeah, I'm not functioning well today. At any rate, the other side of it being he did have the forensic evaluation, and the evaluator said he's fit to stand trial. We didn't actually see that part of it from what and maybe I'm just blanking on this part of the show, or I'm assuming I added it in with my mind. We did see the victim impact statements. And did we see the jury give a verdict? I might have skipped over that in my head. So it's interesting that he says that he did plead insanity.
the only explanation is he must be crazy. And
True.
that's the label that they got. Now that
Society's
has
thinking about
changed.
things.
Or did society or something else turn him into what he became?
And there's still long debates about that. It even amongst the medical field, not just law enforcement and legal field and all that, but medical professionals, medical doctorates, doctor, doctoral medical, whatever MD stands for, medicine of MDs, MDs, PhDs, therapists, psychologists, which are PhDs. I reiterated that because I was like, oh, I think I already said PhD. DOs would be included in that field. You know, we all have long debates about the nurture versus nature, and I even discussed that a little bit in my opinions on the show and what they were demonstrating, and was it the father's fault or was it not his fault? And I said we can't really blame the father because he wasn't telling Jeffrey to go out and kill these human beings, but he also didn't help in that he kind of stoked the fire for that passion of studying dead things. I hate to say things, but started with animals, which is your start of your conduct disorder for antisocial personality disorder.
That started fires, wet the bed, tortured animals. Okay? Dahmer didn't have all three of those, and look what happened. So what I'm saying is you can't always go by what was researched and said before. You have to make your own, I
There's
guess,
always
constructive
exceptions.
theory and analysis of a case, investigate it before you can just jump on that bandwagon.
I'm going to pause him. I just got paranoid about where do I have my box on my laptop? Um, like, am I covering my face or not? Okay, I'm glad I checked because I don't think you guys could see Kenny. I think you could just hear him. So we've got him up. I double checked. I checked the sound. I didn't check the visuals. So I apologize that you guys couldn't see him. So that's fixed. Let's continue with his opinions.
What young Jeffrey Dahmer liked to do was dissect roadkill. Now,
Taxidermy.
in my research, I didn't see that. Now, if that is true, is that a poor choice by the father?
What say you?
And this is something he enjoys, so we're going to do it. Never thinking in a million years it's going to lead to him doing the exact same thing to human beings, which it
Exactly.
did. I'm not saying it led to that, but he did. But during interviews, Jeffrey Dahmer said that he enjoyed that. And I would tend to lean to nature, meaning he was born like that. Now, his
Natural born
father
killer.
in the Netflix
I haven't seen
series
that.
seemed to try to take some blame for that by saying he had those thoughts. Um, I don't know if that is all that uncommon. It is whether you act upon certain thoughts.
See, we agree on
Um,
so much stuff. We're not
there's many of you out
even
there
halfway
that
through this.
have gotten so angry that you say, I could kill them. But you don't. Now, that's
Exactly.
different types of anger. You know, that's a lot of rage. This,
Although, sorry to interrupt you. Um, although, I will say that one of the issues that we're seeing in society right now is the fact that people feel emboldened to do things that normally are thought of as taboo or against social norms or whatever you want to call it. And what I mean is people shooting people for knocking on their door, shooting somebody who turns around in your driveway. You know, what makes somebody think that that's okay to shoot them? You know, road rage situations are getting worse. Attacks in general on populations that you disagree with, whether they are Black, Jewish, Latino. We're seeing more and more of that. Maybe because the news cycles are now 24/7, but I also think partly because people are feeling more emboldened that it's okay to do these violence actions against people if they're pissing you off, basically. So I I agree with him to a certain extent. Normally the average Joe is not going to act out on these thoughts that they're having. And I even said it in the thingy. I don't know if I gave that little disclaimer in there or not. I can't remember now. But our society definitely feels more emboldened to go outside of social norms to express themselves. And I'm putting that in quotes. So, yeah, it's kind of a, to keep using violent topics, it's kind of a double edged sword, right? So, yeah, all right. I'm going to back them up a little bit.
it was simply to control and to dominate.
So, he's talking about not, he's not necessarily referring to this, but in the domestic violence world, in stalking, there's the power and control wheel. And with stalking is a power and control. Part of the actions that serial killers do is they stalk their prey. They pick the person for a certain reason. We saw Jeffrey constantly going out to the clubs to find the next victim. He brought that up as well. I don't think I talked about it in the reaction. I can't remember. It was more than yesterday. I can't remember what I talked about opinion wise, but the power and control wheel is definitely something that in Jeffrey's case seems apparent. So, yeah,
Now, where do you see that? We see that in rape all the time. It's
that's
not
another good example.
fast forward to his time in prison after these arrests and him making fun of body parts and putting ketchup on them and eating them. Not doing that for any other reason than
That's a great example of a connection there. I did not bring that up, but yeah, he was emulating the trying to get accepted, kind of doing the same thing. Good job, Kenny.
now. I guess there's some question as whether he even did that, but it's been documented a couple of times, including by the prisoner who ended up killing Jeffrey Dahmer.
Okay, good to know.
So, now we're not going to go into the victimology of every single one. And I hate to lump them all under one umbrella because they're all different.
They're all
Yet,
individual.
they all made a fatal mistake of trusting Dahmer.
Trusting or kind of a didn't really trust him, but felt this was the only way to make some money or something like that. So I'll expand that a little bit for him.
Protests certainly should have been about whether the police did their job or not. And that ties into race because I feel that if they were middle class white people that were missing, a lot more would have been done. I have no doubt about that.
I agree with that.
Um, that's what should have been protested. Dahmer picked his victims. He said,
Which I think he's saying this. That part is about race. Um, but Jeffrey picking his victims, he's saying is not necessarily about race. And I can see the distinction in that. I don't know enough about everything to say one way or the other. So, yeah, but I can see the distinction that he's making on that.
I don't believe a profiler was ever brought in because these missing persons were never they were
Connected.
never grouped together. There was no correlation between them. Had there been, like the
I need to shut up or this reaction is going to be over an hour long. Oh, okay.
and then the next one, I believe, which was in 1987, 9 year gap in between murders.
I think the TV show had two of them while he was still in high school. And then the third one was a 9-year gap while he was in the military and all that.
Now, during his interviews, I did see him minimize some things. And by minimize, I mean
And
you
that's
don't want
natural.
to fully tell the truth for whatever reason. It might be embarrassing to you, it might be embarrassing to your family. It was just a compulsion to control and to dominate. Yes, Jeffrey, that is true, but you did that control and domination because it gave you a sexual gratification. It
I
got
agree
you
with him
off,
on that.
just like it does all serial killers. He saves some of the body parts. He keeps the skulls. He bleaches the skulls. He decorates his
Okay. I
apartment with
think we're still talking
skulls.
about Dahmer.
Over 3/4 of the audience watching this will say he is absolutely nuts. Sure, that's a knee jerk reaction because we are so repulsed by it. Yet, I don't believe that he was crazy.
Well, and not everybody who participates in cannibalism, whether because of being a serial killer or surviving out in the Rocky Mountains, I think it was the Rocky Mountains for the Donner Party. You know, I don't think you would call the Donners necessarily crazy for wanting to survive.
Well, then you had to have a plan, right? You know he's got to leave at some point in time when you're taking him to your house. The only way to make him not leave is to kill him. So maybe it was not.
So I had talked about how they were making it appear accidental for both Stephen and also for Steve, I believe. Oh, and Steve might have been Latino, now that I think about it. But both of them, it seemed to be, at least from the perspective of Dahmer, accidental. But yeah, he brings up an interesting point. If they tell you this is their goal and this is what they want to do, and you can tell they're reluctantly agreeing to go with you because you're saying yes, they will make it to their show, then he does have a point. There's got to be a plan of, well, what happens when they start pushing? Well, it's time to go. It's time to go.
I think Jeffrey Dahmer has a big issue with his homosexuality. I don't think he ever fully admitted that, but he clearly it was, and I think it was something he struggled with.
Well, and that would support the times that he attacked men who were straight, and they would say they were straight, and he still tried to force himself on them, such as the first Stephen, such as Tracy. I don't know if Tracy was straight. He did say, "You do know I'm not going to sleep with you." So I don't know if it was ever answered that Tracy was gay or not. I can't remember that part. But he would force himself even when the guys were being straightforward and honest with him.
There was a couple things again, his homosexuality and his alcoholism that had a big influence in him becoming who he became.
And I do speak about the alcoholism not helping.
If you've ever had a one night stand or you've picked up women at a bar, when do you do it? Well, I'll tell you. 2 o'clock, last call. Everybody's drunk. Everybody's inhibitions are lowered. And sometimes
I
you've
was never
woken
out
up in the
that late.
morning and said, "Oh my God, what did I do?"
And the women feel that way too.
He didn't put the blame on pornography, but he did say pornography tied into this, just like Ted Bundy did.
And I'm wondering if that's from the interviews that he's watched because the show made it seem like the pornography wasn't really doing it for him. And so thinking about the killing and putting his hands in the blood and that kind of stuff, that's what got him off rather than the pornography. We only had the one scene with pornography, right? I think we only had the one scene in the show.
His parents leaving him alone when he was a senior in high school for months. His parents do have to take responsibility for that.
I agree.
Absolutely. I'm shocked that they didn't bring up any correlations to Ted Bundy, and they did John Wayne Gacy. Uh,
And
I see
Ed
why. I
Gein.
mean, no one ever really saw him blow up. And I'm wondering if that's the alcohol suppressing that.
Well, that could be what he just said. But The show did show him blowing up at Grandma. Grandma was easy to manipulate. She wasn't really an authoritarian type of person. She wasn't one laying down the law. That was Dad. Dad was always having to intervene. And so I think the only no, I can think of a second one. I was going to say, I think the only time we saw him blow up in the show was at Grandma, but we also saw him get kind of angry with Tony when they were doing the game. And Tony was wanting to know why they couldn't do something. And he was like, because, and, kind of slammed the things everywhere. Um, the, the wishbones. I think those are the only two times. I don't think he got in the show. I don't think he got mad at any employers. Again, employers are typically an authoritarian type of position. Um, the teachers, they didn't really show him getting mad at the teachers, just kind of being dismissive and rude to the teachers, not really mad. They didn't show him getting mad at Sherry or Joyce. So, yeah, okay.
Hit the bones with a sledgehammer and then spread them out. That is a very meticulous way of disposing a body, right?
A lot of work.
I think he would have had a better time trying to explain that he was insane at trial if he had just left that body out along the road.
Okay, so they were showing him putting Stephen's body under the house and then changing his mind. So apparently, in interviews or in material that he researched, he actually took the body to a ditch and tried to hide it there. I think that's what I'm understanding.
But he took the body out in a suitcase and then took to his grandmother's house and dissected him and threw away the body parts, I believe, and trash.
Okay, maybe the second victim was 9 years later. I was thinking it was when he was still in high school. They did a lot of jumping around, so I might have lost track of the timeline at that point. So
For somebody that doesn't have a lot of rage or anger, apparently, and you're doing this for gratification, that's a lot of damage. So I'd be curious to know more about that victim.
So, on the addiction side of things, to kind of answer what Ken is pondering, blackouts do exist. Blackouts, the person's still fully functioning, they just don't remember what they're doing, what's going on, all that kind of stuff. So, blackouts are real, they do happen. It's usually under the influence of alcohol or a depressant category, depending on what your addiction is. But most typically, alcohol is what you hear blackouts associated with, not saying it can't happen with other substances. I also have had folks, and I've personally experienced this, where it's more of a brownout. And that's where you don't remember parts, but you remember other parts. And so that's why I call it a brownout, because it's not quite a full blackout. You do remember parts of the night or something like that. And a person doesn't have to have addiction to experience a blackout, brownout, whatever you want to call it. Now, in therapy, there's another term I would use sometimes, and that's a red out. For those who would be so angry that they just forgot, in all of their rage, they forgot what they were doing and stuff like that, lost control. And I've had a friend that would experience red outs. I had an ex boyfriend that would experience red outs. And I've had clients who have experienced red outs where the anger is just so intense. All they see is red, which is why I call it that. And they kind of feel out of control and can't quite remember everything that was said or done or whatever it might be. So it's similar to a brownout where they might remember parts of it, but they don't remember 100% of it, type of thing. So just my perspective and what I've experienced in the field of blackouts, brownouts, and redouts. And like I said, we did see in the show, at least, we did see Dahmer get angry. It was just that victims who couldn't really fight back with him.
In 81, he was discharged from the Army. Uh, and again,
It was a dishonorable discharge, right?
he doesn't kill until 87, and he just said there wasn't an opportunity that presented itself.
I don't fully believe
I
that
do
myself.
believe that in a way.
No, I do say that I don't quite believe that 100%. However, in stalking, the person who is perpetrating the stalking may stop the behavior with one of the victims. Usually there's multiple victims. They will stop the behavior for 5, 10 years, 20 years. And then for whatever reason, the behavior starts back up again with that same victim that they had stopped stalking. So there can be a period of time where there isn't any. Now, that being said, in the stalking world, usually it's on to the next victim, the next person that's kind of taken their attention. So, how that relates to Dahmer or serial killers in general, where they might have a period of time of no killing, I haven't studied that, so I can't speak to it. But to use examples from the research that I've done on the topics that I've studied, that's what would be said.
Peeping Tom, rape, murder. It's an escalation. It's, hey,
Yes.
I did this. I'm comfortable with that. Maybe that doesn't get me off now as much as this.
Yeah, what he's talking about is accurate. We see that in stalking. They may start with what seems like benign behavior, and then it starts escalating up and could possibly turn violent just depending on the path for that person who's perpetrating it. The escalation is all when you're doing a risk assessment, the escalation is also an indicator that they're looking at what are the patterns that they've had type of thing. Like I said, usually by the time they've been caught for stalking, they've had other situations. If they're not outright stalking, they're kind of building up to that. With DWIs, usually by the time the person has caught, I forget when the statistic came about. I believe it was in the 90s. So, based on research up into the 90s, DWIs, if you got one DWI, you had drank and drove, this was on alcohol, at least 200 times before that one. If you think back to your own behaviors back in the day when you don't necessarily think you're impaired or drunk or anything like that, but you're drinking and driving. I've done that in my youth. By the time you get caught, you, on average, have done that about 200 times. So, in a lot of the maladaptive patterns, there's a clinical term for you. In a lot of the maladaptive patterns that we see, there's usually a buildup and escalation that he's talking about.
I equate that to drug users. If there's any former
Well,
or current drug users that are watching this,
we'll see if
think
he
about the
agrees
first
with
time
what I
that you
said.
did heroin or you did cocaine. You're always chasing that first high.
Okay, I didn't say that, but he's
This is
correct
the
on that.
same thing.
They they talk about with cocaine, your first high you'll never experience again. You're always chasing the tail of the dragon, chasing that high as he talked about. So yeah, I didn't bring that up, but he's correct on that as well.
Dahmer had drilled a hole in his head and tried pouring acid and boiling water to turn him into a zombie, to again to have that control and dominance over him. He escaped.
Okay, so that's where they were getting the walking zombies from then, because I was lost on that part and I wasn't sure where they were getting it from.
You got to get an ID, and if the boy can't talk and he's drunk or whatever, you got to get him medical assistance. Period. You just don't turn him back over
Doesn't
to
matter how
somebody
old he
without
is.
getting confirmation. That's my opinion on that.
Well, I I would say that's not opinion. Whether it's an officer, whether it's me working crisis, whatever it might be, if I come across somebody who is that impaired, whether self-induced or not, my duty is to make sure they stay safe first and foremost. So if they are so drunk that they can't even communicate with me, yes, we're getting them to the hospital, making sure they're medically stable, all of that kind of stuff. And then if he sobers up or if the hospital releases him or whatever, it's on them. But I've done my part. Law enforcement, same thing. We had a girl at Penn State when I was there. I worked crisis at the time. I've worked crisis since the mid 90s, and I wasn't personally involved in this case, but we read the local papers. There were multiple local papers, read them all the time, and this young lady was being taken from downtown, which has at least two bars on every block, not to mention two different dance clubs within walking distance of each other, and all some of the restaurants had bars within the restaurants. There were six-pack shops, all this kind of stuff. Not trying to blame alcohol, but college town, alcohol is prevalent. And so they were taking her from downtown to campus. Campus is in the middle of this town, downtown being where all the bars are. And you can walk from downtown back to the dorms 15, 20 minutes because it's uphill. So it might be more like 20 minutes walking uphill. But it's walking distance. And this girl had been out for her 21st birthday, and her two friends were on either side of her, basically dragging her back to the dorms. Her arms were up around them, so she wasn't dragging on the ground, but her feet were not walking. And an officer happened to stop them. This was an officer that used to come and talk at our trainings all the time, but he stopped her, or stopped them, interviewed the young lady who was so drunk that she couldn't speak, and took her straight to the hospital. Turns out she had a .689. And I remember that because the newspaper misprinted it as a .699, but she had a .689 blood alcohol level. And she was in a coma for 3 days. So if that officer had not stopped and well, took her to the hospital, she wasn't really in a position to say no, more than likely she would have died. So, yeah, the officer did the right thing there. The friends should have, when she was unable to walk herself, her friends should have gotten her medical care. But as college students, we don't think about that. So, okay, I forget how I got off on that.
Somebody should have put one of the detectives who got the missing person case, one of these
They
17,
were different
should have been
towns,
checking
though,
other
right?
missing persons cases to find out if there's a pattern here. Again, this is all my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. I don't give a damn. It's my channel. I'm able to give my opinions, and that's what I do. So if you
Told
don't
y'all,
think
he's
that that's
sassy.
correct, I don't like the fact that a government can execute somebody. I don't like that.
Well, and the other aspect of it are these men who have been accused of the crime, have been put to death, and then they find out later that they actually were not guilty of the crime. Um, the Innocence Project and all that has brought that to light and made it clear about things. Plus, now that we have DNA, which is not a sure thing, but it does help clear up some things. I don't think the death penalty should be a quick answer to things. Plus, and I don't know if he's getting ready to say this, Jeffrey wanted to be put to death. And I don't know if it's because of his guilt that Kenny wasn't necessarily talking about his guilt of having killed the people, but like he's been saying, he knew that it was wrong. And so rather than living in prison and trying to be nice to these people that he doesn't know how to be nice to them, he doesn't know how to get along with them, the easier option is just to be put to death. And I think that's why he kept asking for the death penalty. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I have not interviewed him. I have not heard any tapes that said why he kept asking for the death penalty. That's just an assumption on my part. So it's an hour and a half later. We have finished listening to Detective Kenneth Maines, or Kenny as I call him. Uh, that's just habit. I'm used to calling him Kenny, and I know he markets himself as Ken or Kenneth, so I really should get in the habit of saying the name he wants for there in the public. But that's his opinion on the combination of the Netflix show and what he's researched and what he's listened to. So it was kind of interesting to hear his perspective. He made some links that I hadn't necessarily linked together, and we had a lot of similar thinking on our reaction to what was portrayed. So that was cool to see. As I said, his link will be down below, so please go visit his channel if you want to get his perspective on other true crime stuff. It's his passion. He loves looking into this stuff. He doesn't love the work because, people have been hurt, but he does love trying to bring closure to the people and getting some answers for them. So it's his passion. All right, let's move on to WatchMojo, which I haven't watched in years. I watched Miss Mojo on the Barbie stuff recently, and even then it'd been a long time for Miss Mojo. So, yeah, let's see here. They actually have, I was looking to see if there's any differences in the title, and I don't see any. Okay, so I didn't realize this before starting, but they've got a top 20 things. Netflix's The Jeffrey Dahmer Story Got Factually Right and Wrong. And then they also have a top 10 things. Netflix's Jeffrey Dahmer Story Got Factually Right and Wrong. And both of these came out a year ago. I don't know the exact dates. So let's watch the top 20 first, and then we'll see if we feel a need to watch the top 10. And I'll probably do it just to make sure I've covered my butt on them covering everything. So, again, their original will be linked down below. And let's see what they have to say.
Number 20, Officer of the Year Awards. Wrong. Episode 9 of the series shows Milwaukee police officers John Balserzak and Joseph Gabrish each receiving an Officer of the Year award.
Well, I was hoping it was wrong, so let's see what they say about it.
Though both maintained long careers in law enforcement, they were not given awards. Then Police Chief Philip Areola fired them for gross negligence that led to the death of Conorak Synthesomphone in 1991. But Balserzak and Gabrish appealed the decision and were reinstated by 1994 with
So that was
back
true.
pay.
Thank you for all your support.
Balserzak became president of the Milwaukee Police Association, serving 4 years, later retiring in 2017. Gabrish joined the Grafton Police Department and later made captain, eventually becoming chief of police in Trenton, Wisconsin.
That's so frustrating, especially if they were as negligent as the show made them out to be.
Dahmer tried to steal a corpse. Right. Grandma threw out the mannequin. Wrong. According to Dahmer, his grandma did discover his hidden mannequin, but she wasn't the one to throw it out. Believing that she contacted his father about it, he destroyed it himself.
Okay, so he didn't necessarily rage at Grandma. So when I was talking about the rage stuff, maybe he didn't seem to show any rage. So the research that Ken did was more accurate on that part of things than the show was. That might be where he was getting at.
Dahmer's relationship with Tony Hughes. Maybe. Whether or not Jeffrey Dahmer and Tony Hughes knew each other before the night he killed Hughes is not perfectly clear. In his confession, Dahmer claimed he met Hughes at Club 219 just hours before taking him back to the apartment. However, Michael Ross, who knew Hughes at the time, appeared in Conversations with a Killer, the Jeffrey Dahmer tapes, and said that the two did know each other for a while.
Tony knew Jeff for a long time. And Tony and Jeff had relations. Tony told me so.
Shortly after the Netflix series debuted, Shirley Hughes, Tony's mother, echoed Dahmer. Referring to the series' depiction of their romantic relationship, she said it, quote, didn't happen like that. With both Dahmer and Tony Hughes deceased, there's really no way of knowing the truth. Listened to whale noises in prison. Right.
That would be annoying. But like I said, we had a vinyl, not even, it was a soft vinyl thing of whale recordings that went along with the book.
Conorak met Dahmer outside a liquor store. Wrong. Dahmer regularly hung out at Milwaukee's Grand Avenue Mall, where he met some of his victims, including Synthesomphone on May 26, 1991.
Okay. So it was Conorak's older brother that he sexually assaulted. And then he ended up killing Conorak. I thought that young man was related to the jogger. And that's why they said, even after what when Conorak said, even he still went with him even after what he did to his older brother because of the money. I thought it was because of scaring the jogger. So I had that mixed up.
Offered him money to pose for photos, and the teen agreed to go back to his apartment. However, there's no evidence that either of them knew who the other was at the time.
Well, and I did comment about we don't know what happened in the private conversations, whether it was Dahmer's recollection and how accurate that would be, or the story just kind of filling in the gaps.
Dahmer called the families of his victims. Maybe. In the 6th episode of the series, Jeffrey Dahmer makes a call to the family of Errol Lindsay, telling his sister that he was gone, quote, into the vortex. In March 1991, Carolyn Smith reportedly received a menacing call from someone telling her to stop looking for her missing brother Edward Smith, last seen in June 1990. When she asked why, the caller said, quote, because he's dead. The grandparents of Ernest Miller also received calls soon after he went missing in September 1990. One with a man repeating, help me, and another making choking sounds. Joyce Dahmer attempted to take her own life. Right. Created a game called Infinity Land. Right.
With the wishbones?
It's called Infinity Land.
Drinking bags of blood. Wrong. One of the many jobs Dahmer had over the years was as a phlebotomist at the Milwaukee Blood Plasma Center, as seen in the 4th episode. This is true. However, the scene where he stands in the bathroom mirror and consumes blood from a bag is definitely exaggerated. Dahmer admitted to drinking a vial of blood, only to, quote, see how it tasted. And he did so while at work, not at home. Number 10. How
Okay.
Jeffrey Dahmer was caught. Right. Dahmer wore yellow contacts. Right.
I did not even notice the yellow contacts. When did he do that?
One of the lesser-known facts about Dahmer was his strange habit of wearing yellow contact lenses.
You see my contacts? They're just like the Emperor's. Got them at a costume shop in Kenosha.
He wore them because he felt connected to 2 dark characters in his favorite movies: the Emperor from Star Wars Episode 6 Return of the Jedi, and the Gemini Killer from The Exorcist 3. In changing his appearance to
totally
resemble
did
these
not
powerful fictional figures,
remember
Dahmer
the yellow
himself
contacts.
felt more powerful and predatory.
Overcome the thoughts, and it worked for a while, but eventually I gave in.
He
Evan Peters does a good job of his vocal pattern. So that was nice to hear the original person speaking that Evan was portraying.
How Ronald Flowers survived. Wrong.
Oh, I'm mixing up Tracy and Ronald. When I kept saying Tracy, I was thinking of this guy.
But her actual involvement in saving Flowers from her grandson has never been reported. Like in the series, Flowers woke up in County General Hospital.
Where am I? You OD'd. You're lucky to be alive.
But what isn't mentioned is that he was also covered in abrasions and believed he might have been assaulted. He later testified that he didn't know how he got there, though the series provides a fictional scenario.
A guy I met last night, he was weird.
Dahmer posed in yearbook photos. Right. Dahmer killed Dean Vaughn. Unknown. In episode 7, Glenda Cleveland meets Dean Vaughn. She sees him talking to Dahmer in the hall and is visibly concerned. The series doesn't follow through with his story, but Vaughn was really a tenant in the building who was found strangled in his upstairs apartment in early May 1991. Dahmer was questioned about the suspicious death before he was arrested, and again when he was eventually caught. Both times Dahmer denied knowing him, and since he was so forthcoming with the 17 murders he did commit, investigators believed he was telling the truth.
Well, and that makes sense. You know, what is different about Dean that he would not claim killing him when he did, if he had? So he, confessed to 17 others. It makes sense that if he had done it, he would have claimed that he had done it. But we'll never know.
Baptized the same day as John Wayne Gacy's execution. Right.
So you've never done construction work before?
No.
That's weird.
Well, like I said, it's just stuff around the house, helping Mama, you know.
But this connection between 2 notorious killers is definitely eerie.
Congratulations, Jack.
I'll agree on that.
Victim impact statements. Right. One of the most heartbreaking parts of Jeffrey Dahmer's 1992 trial was hearing the impact statements. After sitting through the details of his crimes,
I commented about
family
how
members
hard
of
they
the
were to
victims
hear.
had the opportunity to address the court. One of the more harrowing statements came from Rita Isbell, the sister of Errol Lindsay. The series recreates the emotionally charged moment with actress Deshawn Barnes. Glenda Cleveland lived at the Oxford Apartments. Wrong. In the series, actress Niecy Nash plays the role of Glenda Cleveland, a woman who is often overlooked in the Jeffrey Dahmer case. She interacts with him, mostly to complain about the smell and noise coming from his apartment through her vent. The real Cleveland actually lived in the building next to the Oxford Apartments. The character is likely a composite of Cleveland and Pamela Bass, the woman who lived across the hall from Dahmer, who possibly unknowingly consumed human meat given to her by her neighbor. However, Glenda Cleveland did continuously call Milwaukee police.
Take that back because I talked right over it. I think she said that she did eat sandwiches that were brought to her from Dahmer, not knowing what they probably were.
However, Glenda Cleveland did continuously call Milwaukee police after her daughter Sandra Smith and niece Nicole Childress told her about a boy they tried to help. Milwaukee police officers
Okay, so that part was accurate, where she kept trying to get intervention.
returned a victim back to Dahmer's apartment. Right.
That's sad to know that.
Gabrish and Balcerzak were suspended, but later reinstated. Before we
And
continue, be sure to
given
subscribe to our channel
higher
and ring the bell
positions
to get
later on.
notified about our latest videos. Dahmer always wore his glasses at trial. Wrong. Towards the end of the series, Jeffrey Dahmer goes on trial for the murders. While the majority of the scenes are accurately recreated, there's one detail that was different. Evan Peters as Dahmer almost always wears the killer's trademark glasses. But the real Dahmer specifically did not wear his glasses throughout most of the trial. His reason? He didn't want to look the jury or victims' families in the face. Yes, it's a
That makes
small
sense.
inaccuracy in a largely true-to-life series. However, his decision to remove his eyewear is significant because it shows that he was unable to face his crimes.
So some of the things were good to hear that weren't true. Some of the things are disappointing to hear that were true. And of course, the whole thing is disappointing to hear. But yeah, interesting. If, like I said, I know WatchMojo is not always accurate with their information. So if you know for certain that any of their information is inaccurate, let me know. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop here because this seems to be all the same thing from the list of 20. It sounds like they just decided to redo the video, but rather than take this one down, they just incorporated it into their list of 20 things. So, interesting list of things, but it's still disturbing to hear the story of Dahmer and what happened and everything. Like I said, I know that they're supposedly working on season 2. I don't know what they're doing with that season since they kind of showed the beginning to end of Dahmer, although we did not see all 17 victims. So the only thing I can imagine is they're going to show the stories of the other victims and kind of go from there. Maybe show more of the family stuff. I don't know. But this concludes this journey on this one. It's been recording for 2 hours now. So thank you all for joining me on this journey, this adventure, this series, whatever you want to call it. And I will see you on the next one, which is most likely going to be Dexter New Blood. So, all right. Bye.